Hello friends, today we are going to study tenders. In this study we are going to highlight what are the definition of tender, what are the various methods, what are the tendering process, then what is comparative statements, then what is earnest money, what is global tendering, etc. Myself, Dr. Chittaranjan Naik, working as an associate professor in Vidya Pratishthan Kamal Nayan Bajaj Institute of Technology, Baramati. First, we just see what is meant by tender. Tender is an offer to contractor to do the work for a specified amount of money and specified time and other conditions required to carry out the contract requirements. Main reason is to complete a project. It is nothing but it is a offer to do any type of work with stipulated specified money and time. The tender which is submitted by the contractor is generally based on the bill of quantities and specifications of the statement of work. It is published in the form of tender notice in newspaper, notice board, etc. according to the cost of the work. Then we know about just now we just see what is the tender, and just we are going to study what is contract. There is a little bit confusion in between tender and contract. So here tender means it is the term tender formally means as an invitation to trade on the terms of offer. It is a offer, okay, and contract means it is a agreement between two parties. This is the basic difference. Tender is a offer to someone, and a contract is agreement between two parties, or contract. After tendering process we are going to draw the contract. Then a tender system, the process of finalizing of contract is achieved through the tender process. Advantages of the tender process is most effective method for locking competitive rates. New technology and options are received through the open tender process. What is tender notice? The tender notice is a brief description of the job being tendered to be published in newspapers and on the internet. The internet is a very cost effective way to publish the tenders. Here I just put one tender notice. This is all about what are the requirement of tender notice. We are going to study in details how to form this tender notice, what are the tender documents, and what are the terms used in that tender notice. The format of an ideal tender notice. The tender notice should have the following points: name of the project is required, the name and address of the company offering the tender, who is going to give that tender, that's the address and the name of that project. Name of work, material or services, which work is going to process for tender, or which material required for a tendering process. Place of work and locations, approximate estimated cost of work, earnest money, period of completion, date on which tender document shall commence, date and time up to which tender document can be obtained, then the cost of tender documents, due date of submission, and eligibility criteria. This is one of the format which is need to be to forming a tender, or this is the main document which is used for tendering process. Then first we go for what are the document required and all this thing. We just know what type of tender we are going to invite. So these are the type of tender. Mainly it is an open tender, closed tender or selective tender, or negotiated tender. Open tender, Open tender is bidding process that is open to all qualified bidders. This is open to all, not restricted for anyone. Which those who are qualified bidders, they can apply. It is open to all. The tender usually published in newspaper and internet, chosen on the basis of price and quality. This is most effective way to obtaining many competitive rates. Open tender advantages: any contract can tender their work, no forbidden accord, maximum competition, no commitment to tender, all tender received will be genuine. Open tender disadvantages: client must bear expensive cost of tendering, reproducing number of building, drawing, building, etc. The wrong contractor may be chosen because they are from unknown background, time consuming. These methods open tendering have some. This is the drawbacks in open tendering. It may be the lowest tender may not necessarily be bargain. Choosing a lower tender may be result in poor work. A large number of or even permanent defect may occur unless there is close supervision by the client and agent. Poor organization, late completion, specialist subcontractor delay, etc. These are some of the disadvantages of the open tender. Then limited tender or selective tender. Limited tender, the tender open to bidders in the category stated in the notice only. Example, limited tender is for Bhumipitra bidders only. It is restricted some point. And selective tender, number of contractor of known reputations are selected by the design team to submit a piece of the project. The contractor who submit the lowest tender is generally awarded the contract. The number of chosen to bid under this tender is little. They are chosen for their expertise and experience. This is limited to some category of tenders. This is called as limited tenders. Then negotiated tender. Under this method, only one contract is approached. Normally, because the skill of the contractor is such that the architecture and other members of the design team needed from the contractor specialist knowledge used for design stage. Following the completion of the design, the contractor will price the bill of quantities and then enter into the negotiation with the quantity surveyor. This is negotiated tender. And this is the tendering process. This is all about, in previous we see what are the various types of tender. Now we are going to study what is the tendering process. This is mainly these are the tendering process. First we need to invite the publish the tender notice. After finding out this tender notice, we are inviting the tender. Then after that we just going for tender selections, then tender award. These are the basically 4 process which is going to use in tendering process. Then this tendering process, these are the some point which is used in details, that about 4 points. Preparation of detailed specification and draft contract document. It is in tender process, the first stage of tendering process. Decision on whether to use open or restricted tendering. Determination of realistic schedule for the tender process. Advertisement or requirement tender procedure to be followed, and schedule for expression of interest and submission of bids. Sending out of pre-qualification questionnaires. Issue of invitation of tender and tender documents. Specification and other tender documents. Submission of completed tender or bids. Opening of tender on the given date in presence of appointed officer. Logging of received tenders. Analysis of each tender with view of selecting best offer. Post tender clarification, out of contract. These are the total procedure which is going to followed during the tendering process. Procedure for inviting tender, that is preparing tender documents, issue of notice inviting tender or tender call notice, submission and opening of tender and their scrutiny, acceptance of tender and award. This is the brief point of that tendering process. Then information to be given in tender notice. Before we going to carry out a filing and just publish one tender, we need to write this information in that tender notice: the name of the department inviting the tender, name of work and location, designation officer inviting the tender, last date and time of receipt of tender, period of availability of tender document, cost of tender document, time of completion and type of contract, earnest money deposit to be paid, date, time and place of opening the tender, designation of the officer opening the tender. These are the total information you need to put in that tender notice. Then information to be given in a tender document, that is general condition of tender, schedule of item, work with clear specifications and special conditions. This is in tender document. This is not tender it is tender document to be provided information. Or first one is the information to be provided in tender notice. These are the for tender notice and these are the for tender document. The tender document, again, it is the details, the notice inviting tender in specified form like PWD 6, layout plan, location of the work, division in which location is situated, schedule of quantities of work, nearest road, railway links, set of drawings including working drawings, availability of material in the vicinity, detailed specification of or present reference to standard specification for each item of work, complete architectural and structural drawings, schedule of stores to be issued by the owner of the project indicating the rate and their place of supply, schedule of tool and plants and other facility to be made available by the owner indicating the conditions, hiring charges and place of delivery, rate of supply of power, the point of supply, location of water supply points, time for completion and process to be made at interval of time, condition regarding employment technical personnels, weather conditions in the area, amount of EMD and a form in which it to be paid. Then instances of income tax and sales tax clearance certificate, amount of security deposit to be paid deducted from running bills, contractor should be notified in tender call notice, mode of payment for work done, power to reject tender with assigning region, penalty condition for slow progress and healthy in completion of work, delay in the completion of work, designation of arbitration authority in case of disputes. So these are the 23 points which is need to be included in the tender document. Okay. Then next, specimen of tender notice. This is one of the specimen of tender notice. If you going to provide on tender, this would be properly are these things usually required. The notice inviting tender paper is very important document on which tender and subsequent agreement which to be contractor based. The tender notice should be stipulated reasonable time for completion of work. All tender notice should be displayed as per the standard form of the department. It's displayed in the notice board of the division and also calculated to the related subdivisions and other divisions of the department. For wide publicity of tender, it is also published in the local newspaper. This is the specimen tender notice. In order to minimize the heavy advertisement charges, short tender notice should be given in a tabular form which contains essential information as below. In newspaper, if you are going to publish one tender document, then all documents should be indeed huge, then the cost of that tender will be more. To minimize that cost, this kind of total we are going to provided in short and concise manner. First, name of authority inviting the tender, particulars of contractor eligible to submit tenders, name of work and locations, estimated cost of the work, price of tender from and other tender documents, earnest money to be deposited, time of completion, last date of sale of tender paper, last date of permission, last date of sale tender paper, last date of permission, or also time of opening of tender and accepting authority. These points would be included when the tender will going to provide. This is one of the sample of tender notice. You can draft like this. This is invitation notice inviting tender. First one is tender number. The tender may be written in this. Seal tenders are invited for following works from the experienced, bona fide and researchable outside contractor for the under mentioned work by executive engineer. First, this is name of work, then estimated cost, price of tender, form and schedule, earnest money, time of completion, and accepting authority. So in this format we can give, this is the sample one of the sample of that tender notice. You can draft according to this. Then short tender notice, when work is to be completed very quickly or no contractor prefers to be accepted in the work, the tender is floated. Then a notice with short duration is again published by the client. Such a tender notice is called a short tender notice. The term and conditions remain the same as that for ordinary tender notice. Then quotation, for before going to finalize the all tender document, we need to find the quotation. For small job, the owner engineer give an offer to the contractor for quoting rates for work and supply required, and no EMD is required with a quotation. So these are the important definition which is related to the tendering process. Then earnest money, that is, it is also called as EMD. It is the amount of money to be deposited along with the tender document to the department by the contractor quoting the tender. This money is a guarantee against the refusal of any contractor to the work after acceptance of his tender. In case of refusal, the amount is forfeited. EMD of contractor whose tender are not accepted will be refunded. 1 to 2% of the estimated cost of work is the earnest money deposit. Liquidity damage, it is an amount of compensation payable by the contractor to the owner due to delayed in constructions. This amount of compensation is not related with real damage. This does not reveal the contractor from his obligations and liabilities under the contract. In case if a party of the project or promise is used by the owner before its completion, the amount to be paid is reduced in portion to value of the part that has been utilized after issuing the certificate of the company. The next definition, unliquidated damage, it is the amount of compensation payable when a contract is broken. The party who suffers such as is entitled to receive this amount from the party who has broken the contract. Then comparative statement of the tender, the conference organized by the authority or owner before the last date of submission of tender known as this is not comparative statement, this is pre-bid conference. The conference organized by the authority owner, the last date of submission of the tender is known as a pre-bid conference. Before tender it is would be pre-bid conference, this one. Then rejection of tender, there are mainly two type of rejection of tender. Rejection of the tender, the lowest tender. The tender can be rejected under following situations: when the tender is not submitted in a particular form sold by the department, earnest money is required is not enclosed along with tender, when contractor has put some condition which are not acceptable to the department, the lowest tender has become bankrupt, therefore no sufficient amount to be finance the work, lack of experience, the contractor may not be having necessary experience of a particular work to be executed, bad reputations, the lowest tender might have a bad name in the market. These points, if you are find in that, then you can reject tender as a lowest tender. Then next rejections, rejecting all tenders. All tender can be rejected under following conditions: after the publication of tender notice, if it is found that the changes in design are found essential, it is suspected that there is a collision among the contractor. The lowest tender has quoted very high rates that estimated is. You can just reject all the tenders. Then unbalanced tender. The total cost is based on estimated quantity for different schedules. This type of contract known as item rate contract. These quantities are approximate and it can be vary according to different site conditions. Hence, total amount tender cannot be taken as a criteria for awarding contract. In such case, the best criteria is to check and analyze the rates quoted by different contractor for different work, and that kind of tender is called as unbalanced tender. For example, contractor A is not giving any chance to site engineer for classification of soil, but that soil is classified as soft or hard rock, etc. He is going to get some amount, this because of unbalanced tender. Such unbalanced tender, which will be cause considerable loss to the department, should be rejected. Then informal tender. When a tender is called as informal, when it has not submitted in the form of prescribed by the department, calling from the tender or not deposited by due to the late and time as notified. When it is not supported by the requisite earnest money as specified in the tender and the manner of depositing the prescribed in the notice. When the tender form is not properly filled or is not assigned by the contractor or is authorized agent holding power of autonomy with withstand by the third parties. When the tender is qualified or it made conditional by way of adding indefinite uncertain liabilities or unusual character to by the infringement of the standard rules and other government and local bodies. When the deviation is made from that what has been laid down or any correction is made without any signature and seal. The tender containing any of the above defects is liable to some rejection of the as a informal tender. Then global tender. Global tender is nothing but it is one type of tender, that is you can the contractor from outside also can apply. For big and specialized project or design manufacture, sometimes a global tender are invited by the authority concerned throughout the world so as to get maximum competitive offers from various reputed firms or experienced manufacturers throughout the world. The particular and content of the tender notice is same as that of ordinary tender notice. Only the global tender notice is written on the heading of notice inviting tender. It is circulated through the reputed newspaper which cover the outside countries. Beside this, also circulated through the embassies officers located at different important countries throughout the global or world. This is called as global tender. Okay, thank you.